An elderly man named Patrick sits alone late at night in his trailer, listening to the radio with a small glass of liquor on the table. A romantic song plays, and as he hears it, he recalls a young woman peering into his car through streams of rainwater. Outside the trailer, thunder rumbles and a heavy rainstorm begins, mirroring the scene in his mind. Patrick glances at a vial of clear liquid, but then sets it aside. Lightning flashes outside as a loud knock sounds at his door. Patrick nervously looks toward the door and tells the stranger to go away. But the knocking continues, and a moment later, a woman's voice pleads from outside, asking to be let in. After some hesitation, Patrick opens the door to find a rain-soaked young woman seeking a ride to town. His car sits just outside the trailer. Patrick glances around his kitchen, then opens the door wider for her. The woman, drenched and shivering, steps in, but declines the towel Patrick offers, saying she just needs to get to town. Patrick questions how she ended up there so late, but she can only explain that she ran. Patrick informs her that his car is broken and he can't help. Buses don't run at this hour either. He apologizes for not opening the door sooner, explaining that local kids often play pranks, knocking and running away. The woman notices the glass on his table. Patrick suggests she remove her wet sweater to let it dry. The woman insists she won't stay long and asks to use the phone. Patrick seems not to hear her request, instead expressing surprise at her claim that she'd been swimming at the beach. He eyes her bare, muddy feet, puzzled. The beach is far from here. He invites her to sit, as she clearly needs rest. Hesitantly, the woman takes a seat and Patrick offers her tea. She declines again, mentioning she'd prefer a cigarette, but Patrick doesn't have any. Patrick places a cup of tea in front of her. She asks once more to call a taxi, mentioning she's staying nearby but doesn't want to walk in this weather. Patrick quickly deduces she's not local. The swimming season ended long ago due to the cold, and storms like this only happen in summer. Patrick offers her some alcohol instead, but she persists with her request for a phone. He hands her some coins, explaining he doesn't have a mobile. She'd have to use a payphone. However, it's difficult to reach as it's beyond the park gates, which are locked at night. He adds that the locals are peculiar, full of fear, just like him. The woman thanks him for his help and starts to leave, not wanting to disrupt him further. But Patrick points out that she'll have to wait for the park to reopen. Reluctantly, she agrees to stay and wait for her clothes to dry. As she stands, she begins to explore the room, asking questions, which Patrick answers thoughtfully. He shares that he grew up by the coast and moved to the city in his 20s. While wandering, she finds a few feminine items on a dresser. She examines a small watch and admits she's unemployed too, constantly unlucky, something they seem to have in common. But Patrick disagrees, mentioning he worked as an electrician until a shocking accident involving a light socket made him quit. After such an intense experience, routine work lost its appeal. He muses that people crave danger, seeking thrills through risky endeavors like skydiving. Meanwhile, the woman picks up a locket containing a lock of hair. Patrick continues musing about human nature's draw to danger before asking where she's staying. The woman gives vague answers, arousing Patrick's suspicion. She also claims she's never been here before, though Patrick finds her face oddly familiar. He takes the locket from her and suggests she take a shower to warm up, noticing her shivering. She eventually agrees and heads to the bathroom. Behind the closed door, still wary of Patrick, she studies herself in the mirror, fiddling with an earring. Then she steps under the water. Suddenly, she notices the water running down her body turns muddy, mixed with streaks of blood, washing away into the drain. Panicked, she hears Patrick knocking, bringing her a towel. The water clears, and as she peeks out from behind the shower curtain, she sees the towel hanging on the door. Looking back in the mirror, her forehead appears clean, with no sign of injury. Meanwhile, Patrick heats soup on the stove and offers her a dry sweater, mentioning it belonged to an ex-girlfriend. He reassures her he's single and she can keep the sweater. The woman admits she's alone too, struggling to take care of herself, which is why family isn't an option. She describes herself as independent, someone drawn to danger, only to regret it later. Patrick pours thick, red soup into a bowl, surprised by her self-awareness. Most women, he says, blame others for their mistakes. She suddenly laments agreeing to stay late at work to lock the gates. This statement alarms Patrick, especially when he notices her earring. She moves to the couch with the soup while he rinses the pot, but she doesn't touch the soup. Instead, she asks about Patrick's nighttime activities. He admits he suffers from insomnia. Aging, he says, brings restless nights filled with nightmares, unlike childhood, where even after scary cartoons, sleep came easily. He washes the pot, watching the water turn red and thick, like blood. Patrick reflects on how nightmares blur with reality, filling the mind with fear, making one wish to vanish or return to innocent dreams. Lightning flashes outside again, and the woman suddenly questions how she got in if the park gates were locked. Patrick is curious to know as well. Suddenly, there's another knock at the door, and Patrick asks the woman who might have known she was coming to him. The woman looks puzzled, insisting she didn't tell anyone. Patrick opens the door, but no one is there. Rain pours, the wind howls, and thunder crashes. He explains that the kids from the trailer park enjoy teasing him, knocking and running away. He steps back to the sink while the woman watches the door, thinking she saw him lock it earlier. Meanwhile, Patrick discreetly pulls out a vial of some substance and stares at it. The woman notices his boots by the couch and pours her soup into them. Suddenly, the power goes out, plunging the trailer into darkness. Patrick lights a flashlight and scans the ceiling, where it seems someone might be walking above. He speculates that a tree might have fallen on the power lines, meaning she'll have to stay longer. He'd check outside, but he's reluctant to wear the soup-filled boots. The woman feels awkward, admitting she let her imagination run wild with scary thoughts and now feels embarrassed. Patrick reassures her, emphasizing she's free to leave anytime. Patrick heads to check the circuit breakers, and the woman follows, using the flashlight to illuminate the way. Patrick opens the relay box, sharing a childhood story about being terrified of his father during a power outage. The woman glances down at a toolbox and suddenly notices blood on a hammer, but when she shines the light directly on it, the hammer appears dry and clean. Then she sees bleeding scratches on Patrick's back and offers to fetch first aid supplies to treat them. In the bathroom, she rummages through the cabinet and finds a vial containing her other earring amidst women's accessories. Terrified, she tries to put the earring back, but accidentally drops it down the drain. She senses someone lying behind the shower curtain. With a rush of fear, she pulls it back, only to find an empty tub. Meanwhile, Patrick drifts into another memory of the rain-drenched car. The woman returns from the bathroom, declaring she's leaving. Patrick tries to dissuade her, suggesting she wait out the storm and inviting her to play cards. He admits he only knows one game. I doubt it. The woman, however, demands to know why he has her earring. Patrick, offended, accuses her of snooping where she shouldn't. The woman insists she was trying to make sense of what's happening and now firmly states she's leaving. She asks for the key, wanting to go home. Patrick, perplexed, asks what scared her so much. What did he do wrong? He let her in, gave her warmth, and offered her drinks, yet she's repaying him with accusations. He laments that women always do this, bursting into his life only to tear it apart. What's she even doing here? The woman starts yelling, demanding the key, but Patrick calmly tells her the door isn't locked. She tries the door and finds it indeed unlocked. Embarrassed by her baseless outburst, she decides to stay. Patrick deals the cards for I doubt it, joking that if she wants, she can pour alcohol into his sneakers. For the first time that night, the woman smiles. Patrick once again wonders where he might have seen her before. The woman speculates that as people age, all the women they've known start to look alike, similar in their struggles, all running from something. As they play, Patrick shares humorous stories about his neighbors who live near the park's entrance. In turn, she admits she's been hiding from reality and her own flaws. She confesses she was drinking at a bar before the storm. Patrick recalls she mentioned the beach, but in the spirit of the game says he doesn't believe her. He then admits he lied about the sweater. He explains how he met his late wife at a gas station where she asked him to buy her a bag of chips. At first, he thought she was homeless, but she was well-dressed, with beautifully clean hair. He bought her the chips, and they sat together, eating in silence. She later died of an overdose. Truthfully, no one set foot in his home for a long time. He's glad she's here, saying her presence makes him feel alive. He pours more into her glass, but as she raises it to her lips, she notices a lipstick stain on the rim, reigniting her suspicions. The storm intensifies and Patrick steps outside. Suddenly, the woman hears a phone vibrating. She follows the sound to a back room and finds a phone on the bed, where a dead woman lies under the sheets. Terrified, she tries to hide and plans to escape through a small window in the storage room, intending to smash it with the hammer she previously thought was covered in blood. But when she picks up the hammer, it appears bloody again. Realizing her only way out is through the door, she steps out of the storage room and runs straight into Patrick, who captures and ties her up. He forces her mouth open and makes her drink a mysterious liquid. She struggles, but Patrick drags her to the bedroom and throws her onto the bed next to the lifeless woman. As she desperately tries to free her hands and escape through a small window, Patrick begins to monologue about the woman lying there. She had asked for chips and willingly got into his car. And the current woman? What did she expect, showing up at a stranger's home in the middle of the night? Fate, he says, has nothing to do with it. It's all about choices. The woman feels herself losing consciousness. Patrick admits he gave her a banned substance, one that will soon kill her. He recounts the story of the first woman he killed, who approached him during a storm on the beach, asking for a ride. He vividly remembers the tattoo on her ribs, even though he's long forgotten her face. Today, he says, he's been lucky. 2 kills in one night. No one will ever know. Sin, he continues, is just a myth. There is no God, only a conscience that can be ignored. As the woman passes out, Patrick covers her face and waits for her to die, once again recalling the stormy beach scene. Suddenly, he notices a tattoo on her chest and realizes, with mounting horror, that she's the same woman he killed years ago. Plunged into a nightmare, Patrick is confronted by all the women he's murdered. They fill his house, drinking, bathing, and laughing at him. He's abruptly enveloped in darkness, where he hears the terrifying sound of his father's ventilator, a noise that haunted him as a child. Emerging from the darkness, drenched in blood and despair, he is surrounded by his victims as the sound of police knocking at the door grows louder. His most recent victim steps out of the shadows, forcing him to pour the contents of the vial into a bottle and drink it. The other women cheer him on, driving him to madness. Suddenly, it all ends. Patrick opens his eyes to find there was no storm, no woman. Everything had been a hallucination. The door knocks again, and when he opens it, he sees kids running away. He pulls an empty vial from his pocket and laughs, realizing he drank the solution in his delirium. Returning inside, he locks the door. Moments later, a thud is heard, the sound of his body hitting the floor. This film will appeal to those who appreciate a slow, deliberate pace, a willingness to listen, and the readiness to piece together what remains unsaid. Frequent close-ups of the characters' faces invite viewers to look deeper beyond the surface, revealing a chilling truth: there is no fate, only actions.